7th of December in the year 2150. In a few hours, our much beloved Earth will no longer exist. I shall now explain, beginning with my account of the events of the past 3 months on the planet. The Eurasian Dynasty had just finished working on their space shuttles, in which they wished to leave the doomed Earth. These shuttles only had room for a relatively small number of persons, but it was enough for Tsar Vladimir II and many of his selected henchmen. All of the ED citizens who were helping with the work naturally hoped that this would guarantee them space on one of the shuttles. The last chance to escape the catastrophe in time. The ED needed more resources to finish their space shuttles. A rich source of raw materials was located in Finland, but the site was occupied by LC troops. So the Tsar sent one of his best generals to the location to sweep it clean of LC troops, then start reconstruction and resource production for the ED. General Fedorov of the Mobile Commandos was the man chosen for this mission. Since Scandinavia was firmly in the hands of the LC, and the ED could not afford to launch a large offensive at the time, the general could only take with him a small group of units. A larger force would have attracted deadly attention. A frontal attack on the LC base was impossible with a small number of troops, so Fedorov and his subordinate officers started looking for ways to achieve their goal. While General Fedorov was mining the necessary resources in Finland, the UCS had managed to send troops by sea to Korea and had stationed them there. It was obvious that they were after the rocket launching pads in China. They meant to swiftly destroy their hated enemies by preventing them from leaving doomed Earth. But these troops were discovered before they could start the attack. The Tsar acted quickly, sending Fedorov to Korea. He was to carry out a swift counterattack on those busy constructing the UCS base. This would effectively neutralize the enemy threat there. The UCS had their base on the coast in the southern part of Korea. They were in the process of creating an attack force consisting of Army, Navy, and Air Force units, with possible attacks from the air, land, and sea. It wasn't an easy mission for Fedorov. The ED had hardly solved one problem when they were confronted with another. The LC had attacked one of the bases responsible for space shuttle electronics. Just one more delivery was urgently needed from that base. Luckily, the LC hadn't totally destroyed everything. They had only deactivated the base. If the ED could act quickly enough, the delivery could still be saved. So Tsar Vladimir once again sent his best man to the front. This time, General Fedorov was to recapture the base with a small force of reliable fighters. After that, the base had to be made operational again, and the essential electronics manufactured and delivered to the shuttles. Fedorov also had to stave off any enemy attacks while this work was continuing on site. So as soon as the electronic parts had been manufactured, they had to be gotten out of the danger zone. The shuttle exodus was threatened, and now the Tsar wanted revenge in the form of a counterattack. He sent Fedorov to Bulgaria, where a UCS production plant was located. Here, the general was to raze everything to the ground. This would let the UCS know that the ED was not to be trifled with. Fedorov did not find the plan particularly clever, but like a good soldier that he was, he and his troops made their way to the front line. They were to construct their mission base in northern Bulgaria, since the UCS production plant lay far to the south. This UCS base was heavily fortified. The river separating both sides was yet another obstacle to overcome. The whole scenario was made even more difficult, while the UCS could only be attacked from the east, where the defenses were the strongest. Reliable as ever, General Fedorov started going about his work. After the successful attack on the UCS, the Tsar summoned General Fedorov to discuss an internal matter. Fedorov was told to his dismay and anger that a small group of ED rebels were planning to sabotage the shuttle launching bases. These traitors had to be stopped. Although Fedorov wasn't too keen on killing his own fellow ED soldiers, he departed for Russia to search for the rebel base. According to the information he had been given, this base was to be southwest of the starting point. With heavy heart, the general began his preparations. Generals Ivanov and Fedorov discovered that they had both been cheated and used by the Tsar. He intended to leave the Earth without them. They decided to capture the shuttle and distribute the available spaces themselves. But an attack on the rocket launching pads would have been tactically unwise at the time. The generals agreed to try and stop the shuttle's food supply. This had a twofold effect. It would first delay the shuttle's start, and secondly, they hoped this act of sabotage would distract the main forces away from the shuttle's launching pads. The most important production warehouse was located in a fertile valley that was protected by a dam from the waters of a nearby lake. The generals wanted to blow up this dam and flood the valley. Before they could do that, the two main enemy defense bases had to be destroyed. Then, the TNT charges could be laid and positioned at the dam. The blowing up of the dam was successful. The valley flooded and the production warehouse destroyed. The rebels were about to leave when General Ivanov noticed command headquarters troops approaching. The generals could not understand why the troops were there. The source of food had been totally destroyed. The command headquarters should have better things to do than send troops on a revenge attack on rebels. Then they suddenly realized that maybe there had been more than just food production there. They quickly sent several divers down to search the underwater wreckage. In the meantime, the generals prepared to hold their positions until the divers had finished. The generals hadn't meant to sink UCS stolen secret construction plans under all that water. Doing that had achieved exactly what they wanted. Command headquarters forces concentrated fully on those plans, forgetting all else, including the rocket launching pads. The generals acted immediately. Together with the troops, they marched into China, where the launching pads were located. The launching pads, reconstructed rocket control centers, lay well protected far to the north, surrounded by a heavily defended command headquarters base. The rebels' objective was to storm the base, capture the launching pads, and eliminate any hostile opposition along the way. The base's heavy defenses and the dwindling amount of time left until the space shuttle's departure further complicated an almost impossible mission. The rebels had been fooled yet again. The launching pads in China were apparently a decoy. The buildings captured by the generals were empty. Shortly afterwards, they saw the silhouette of the real space shuttle behind the mountain as it rose into the air with the command headquarters staff on board. General Ivanov did not give up yet. He frantically looked for another way of leaving the planet. Seeing a furious activity in the remaining LC troops, he suspected that they had found another means of escape. He sent spies to find out exactly what the LC were up to. He learned that the LC had constructed a large complex in France for mining resources. To find out more, Ivanov wanted to install several radar devices in the vicinity of the Lunar Corporation. A small plateau lay near the base. The only problem was how to get the devices in undamaged. So it was true. The LC forces were working on a secret project to enable them to escape from the doomed planet. The rebels had captured documents alluding to a secret LC construction project. All that the generals could glean was that there was a secret research base in Poland where work on this project was being carried on. They decided to march into Poland and take the secret project for themselves. They couldn't just walk in. The heavy defenses all around the borders prevented that. An alternative would be to enter Czechoslovakia first and try to get in from there. The generals concentrated a large part of their forces at the border. There, they prepared their attack on the heavily defended base in northern Poland. The LC's defense perimeter was penetrated. The ED, fueled by hopes of escape, now sent the majority of their forces into Poland to steal the project from the LC. But they closed their eyes to the fact that in so doing, they were actually endangering the project. They themselves would not be able to finish it. By depriving the LC of their hard-won second chance of escape, they were also condemning themselves to death when the planet exploded. But the LC was not yet beaten. Though military tactics in battle were not exactly their strong suits, they certainly were not totally defenseless. The remaining LC forces continued to work on their escape plan. It was kept secret, even from their own people. But the ED saw in the LC project a last chance to escape the doomed planet. They put the LC under enormous pressure to try to reach Poland, where they suspected the project research was being carried out. The not-so-military-minded LC pinned all their hopes to the strategic talents of a new recruit whom they entrusted with the defense of their domain. The new recruit managed to halt the first attack waves on the research base, but the ED did not give up. They constructed a base in Poland from which they could plan their next attack on the research base. The LC feared for their project. Driven by desperation and encouraged by the recent success, they counterattacked the ED base in an attempt to neutralize the threat. Once again, the new recruits succeeded in defending the LC base against hostile troops. But a new storm was brewing. ED forces were moving into the Ukraine to renew their attacks on Poland from there. LC spies discovered the base still under construction, and it was decided to stifle the threat before it could develop any further. The new recruit received the command to lead an attack against the Ukraine. But the ED base was protected by 4 artillery positions. This prevented the LC from either moving a good-sized force into the Ukraine or constructing a base there. The decision was taken to slip a combat patrol past the enemy spies. They would surely find out the location of the artillery units. After the threat from the ED was neutralized, the LC forces were able to concentrate on their escape plan. The project involved the construction of an advanced space teleporter, but there were difficulties with the transport mode. The technology itself did not function properly, and time was running out. However, The sister scientists unanimously thought they could achieve the desired result by using the basic UCS teleporter technology. Golan, the UCS computer, screened all attempts at communication, leaving only one path open to the LC, that of force. They would have to go to America to achieve their objectives. The UCS had decided to abandon their European bases. Portugal seemed to be the ideal departure point. That country was in the firm machine-like grasp of the UCS. The LC did not know what had prompted the sudden UCS attack. It had cleared the way to America, and the first troops were sent over the ocean. They should test the lay of the land and locate a quiet, suitable landing site for the rest of the LC units to follow. But the UCS seemed to be prepared for their arrival. There were massive troop movements in the area of the landing site. Caution would be the watchword. The UCS rebels made a pact with the LC. They would help the LC to get the necessary transporter information in return for help in eliminating Golan. The LC agreed and left for Florida, the site of the UCS research base, which had the weakest defenses of all UCS complexes. But that's not to say that it would be a piece of cake. A well-camouflaged rebel salamander should be able to get through enemy lines unchallenged, steal the data, then bring back the booty to the nearby LC base. When the rebels had fulfilled their part of the bargain, and the LC started to push on with their own project, Golan had to be eliminated. From a technical standpoint, that would prove difficult. Golan's main control center was equipped with several different protective devices. This meant that the force shield would first have to be deactivated before technicians could switch the evildoer off. For that, they would need the ED's ion cannon. Their own electro cannon would cause structural damage, which would trigger even more protective measures. The LC decided to attack China and steal the needed technology for themselves. The LC returned to America with the captured ion technology. Confident that they could at last deactivate Golan, Golan again reacted quicker, attacking the LC main base in America. The situation was indeed grim. If the LC lost their main base, they would never be able to carry out their daring plan. The new recruit was once again entrusted with the defense of the base. Her extraordinary talent in battle tactics should win the day. The LC was now ready to carry out the final attack on Golan. To neutralize him, the protective shield around the control panel had to be deactivated with the ion cannon. Then, rebel technicians had to get into the building and switch Golan off. But that was all relatively theoretical. They would have to find the way past Golan's defenses, and they knew nothing about them. Golan seemed to have been defeated. The advanced space teleporter technology was meanwhile finished. Still, the LC could not breathe easily. The supposed UCS rebels, now spread all over Europe, suddenly attacked the Allied LC forces and marched on Poland. They were already in Germany, and if they weren't stopped there, Poland would fall. The LC had to prove themselves in one more test of strength. 4 sites had to be protected, and the UCS held back. Together with the ED, the LC had succeeded in protecting the teleporter. But a closer inspection of the destroyed UCS base showed that Golan had masterminded the attack. So he had not been deactivated. He was still active and dangerous, and he had invented the supposed rebels as well. The new alliance searched for a logical explanation to Golan's behavior to no avail, and decided to go to America anyway. They would deactivate Golan and eliminate all the UCS forces there. That way, they could be sure that the danger from Golan was neutralized, once and for all. LC forces surrounded our base. They still did not have the numbers to mount a full-scale attack, but they had secured all roads over the mountains, preventing any chance we had of breaking through. But there still was one route the LC had forgotten: the tunnel system. It led under the mountains and behind the LC defenses. But we would have to first reach the entrance to the east. To do that, we would have to get past some smaller LC positions, which were being constructed. We started right away before the LC could finally attack us. It was our only chance. On the way, I heard LC forces following us. They stayed hidden, probably wanting to surprise us. They had now lost the element of surprise, but here, in the open, with no defenses to protect us, the LC would slaughter us, and we couldn't shake them off. Their hover vehicles were faster than our mechs. But there was a cleft in the mountains that could easily be defended. We hurried to reach it and build a base there, sealing off the pass. We constructed walls and had a few Panthers guard the entrance. Our defenses would be able to repel the first attack wave. But sooner or later, we would need more units and more lines of defense. Our next objective was Golan's deactivated headquarters. We hoped to find some kind of evidence for the LC there to prove that we only wanted peace. We were innocent of the treacherous attack on the escape project and wanted to show the LC that Golan alone was responsible. But this headquarters was, of course, well protected by hordes of LC and ED troops, so an attack was out of the question. No, we had another plan. We wanted to get into a weakly defended ED base nearby, steal a few tanks, and roll them right up to Golan's headquarters, unopposed. A commando detachment was already on the way. They were supposed to enter the base from behind and capture the tanks. We had found the base of the other UCS group. We were still puzzled as to why they had attacked us. We were in a difficult situation, and rivalry among ourselves was the last thing we needed. When we got there, we found that the ED stormtroopers had taken over the base. We decided to help our relatives and attack the ED. For that, we would need to construct our own base, so we started immediately. Then we would attack the ED base with sufficient forces to overrun it and get through to the other UCS group. Their base was located above the ED base on a plateau. By this action, we hoped that the other UCS group would see that we were on their side.
But we had expected more gratitude from our relations. But instead of speaking with us, they blew up our base and fled through the tunnel system. But that made us want to know even more with whom we were dealing with. So we sent some troops into the tunnel system to follow the units of the other group. We simply had to see where they were going. The tunnel system was very long and seemed to form a huge, complex labyrinth whose reason for existence we could not fathom. We tried not to lose the tracks of those we were following. We would have become hopelessly lost. We had no idea where or when we would come out of these tunnels. But when we did finally exit, they were waiting for us.
We had not heard anything from the other UCS group for some time, so we decided to return to the original plan and pay Golan's headquarters a visit. We would still need ED vehicles to get past the numerous guard posts successfully. This time, we chose Venezuela as our target. The ED base, still under construction, was expecting a convoy with new building materials. We needed those trucks, so we decided to put together an attacking army under a cloak of secrecy. Then, we could attack the base when the trucks were there, otherwise they might have been tipped off. But if the enemy discovered us, our plan would fail before it had begun. So we had to be careful with our reconnaissance flights and the manner in which we flew our units in. The Earth had started to shake. Time was running out for us. If we wanted to escape the Big Bang, then we would have to do it swiftly. The LCNED had already started taking down their American camps to ship their troops to Europe. That is where the last chance for escape was located, so we would have to make our way there as well. Unfortunately, we still could not contact the LC or the ED. Golan's radio jammers seemed to be working well. That meant we would have to fight our way to Europe, because the coastal strip was firmly in the hands of the LC and the ED. We decided to try and break through near New York. There was a heavily defended ED base there, lying a little to the south. A hard nut to crack. But if we wanted to reach Europe, it had to be done. The LC had also constructed a base there, to the east of our own, right on the coast, among the city ruins. Both these enemy bases were receiving reinforcements that had to cross a nearby bridge. We thought it would definitely help our mission if we could destroy this bridge. A difficult task, but we had no choice, so we started immediately. At last, we had reached Great Britain and managed to make contact with the LC. Of course, they did not trust us at all, but at least they managed to listen to us and wanted to check our material. We were supposed to wait in Great Britain for the arrival of their convoys. We had achieved much, but now we had to put our destinies in the hands of the LC. They would decide what lay ahead for us. Now that they had taken us into the alliance against Golan, they immediately sent us to the front. Golan had used his huge tunnel system to land unnoticed in White Russia. Apparently, he was after the ED position there. It commanded a central location and was an important collection center for troops and materials. The ED could not afford to lose this area, so they asked for our help. When we arrived in White Russia, now a barren land, we found out that Golan had already constructed a well-defended base there. If we did not take a hand in the proceedings soon, he would make short work of the ED. So we immediately began with the construction of our own base to enable us to come to the aid of the ED as quick as possible. Time was running out. We had hardly ended the successful defense of White Russia against Golan when we received the next piece of bad news. Golan had managed to slip into Poland behind our backs. The attack on White Russia had probably only been a decoy. The LC alone had not been able to stop Golan. The teleporter was fortunately still intact. But Golan had already constructed an unbelievably well-defended base. In the little time that we had left to us, it was almost impossible to break through those tremendously tough defenses. But despair lent us strength, and we prepared to fight. The ED already had a base to the north, and prepared to attack Golan from there. The LC had been able to save a few buildings in the northwest, and we too had meanwhile managed to construct a respectable base. But Golan's base in the south was much more powerful. We would surely need all of our combined strength for this. The final battle. I now end my narration. We are now preparing to enter the teleporter. I do not even know if it functions properly. We may end up somewhere in this universe, healthy and ready for a new start, or we may end up shattered into particles, which float forever in the cold void. But that's now not what troubles me. Golan's motives remain unexplained. But we have found papers in the destroyed base. They say that the command staff of the UCS, ED, and LC, the ones who got places on board the space shuttles, instructed Golan to prevent us from following them into space. I suspect they fear our anger, since we had been cheated out of our rightful places in the shuttles. But Golan failed. Now, We must leave this planet and trust our lives to the teleport.